Hey guys, tonight we are going somewhere very quiet, not peaceful. Exactly. The southern plains in the 19th century are rarely kind enough to promise peace, but quiet, certainly. The sort of quiet in which the wind moves through dry grass, horses breathe somewhere beyond the darkness, and every small sound seems to travel farther than it should. If you enjoy these slow journeys into the less comfortable corners of history, you can subscribe, leave a like, or tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. And as always, there is no need to stay awake until the end. Dim the lights, get comfortable, and let the room around you become still, because tonight you are sleeping in Comanche. It is sometime in the middle decades of the 19th century, and the sun is lowering over the southern plains. There is no bedroom waiting for you, no wooden door, no stone wall, no lock. Above you stretches a sky so broad that it seems less like a roof over the world and more like the world itself. The western horizon burns orange for a little while, then softens toward red. Long shadows spill from horses, people, and bundles lying upon the grass. Soon, all of this will disappear into darkness. And before that happens, you must decide where you are going to sleep. This decision matters more than almost anything else you will do tonight. For a Comanche warrior traveling through the wild country of the southern plains, sleep is never simply a matter of becoming tired and lying down. The land around you may contain enemies. Somewhere beyond sight might be another war party. There may be wolves near the horse herd. A storm may be gathering beyond the horizon. A cold wind may arrive after midnight. And somewhere, perhaps several miles behind you, someone may have found your tracks. So you look at the land, really look at it. This is a skill that takes years to learn. A newcomer sees grass, stone, water, hills, and empty distance. You see possibilities. That shallow rise to the north offers a view across the prairie, but it also places a sleeping camp against the evening sky. Anyone approaching from below might see figures moving along its crest. The cottonwoods near the stream promise firewood and water, but their shadows could hide another person just as easily as they hide you. The low ground feels protected from the wind, yet rain miles away can send sudden water through channels that appeared dry only hours earlier. Nothing is simply good or bad. Everything depends upon what might happen next. This is one of the great differences between people who merely cross a landscape and people whose lives have been shaped by it. Comanche power grew from extraordinary mobility across a vast region that outsiders came to call Comancheria. Its reach shifted through time, but at its height it stretched across enormous portions of what are now Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, and Kansas. There were no castle walls marking its boundaries, no line of stone towers. The land itself was the fortress, and you had better know how to read it. In colder weather, deep canyon country could provide protection that the open plains could not. Imagine descending toward a place such as Palo Duro Canyon. Up above, winter wind races over the exposed prairie. There are few trees large enough to stop it. The cold seems to pass through hide, wool, and skin until it settles somewhere inside the bones. But below the canyon rim, the world changes. Walls of red and brown earth interrupt the wind. Water can be found. Grass provides grazing for horses. Trails leading downward are limited, which means anyone approaching a camp cannot simply ride in from every direction. A canyon gives shelter. It also gives warning. That matters. Yet tonight you are not deep inside such a refuge. You are traveling. The camp must remain temporary. Nothing about it should suggest permanence. The horses are tired, and so are you. But fatigue cannot be permitted to choose the campsite. You study the horizon while there is still light. Other people are doing the same. Someone examines the ground for recent tracks. Someone watches the distant ridges. Another person considers the horses and where they can graze without wandering too far. Water matters enormously, but sleeping directly beside it may be foolish. Animals come to water, people come to water. Enemies know that people come to water, so the safest place is not necessarily the most comfortable place. This is something history repeatedly teaches in unpleasant ways. Comfort makes demands. A warm fire asks for smoke. A sheltered grove asks you to surrender visibility. A riverbank asks you to accept that someone else may be following the same river. You begin to understand why survival here depends upon compromise. The camp settles some distance from the water. The evening air cools quickly. A horse shakes its mane. Leather creaks somewhere nearby. A child speaks and is answered softly. There is work to do before anyone sleeps. The tippy poles must be placed. Hide coverings must be arranged. Horses need attention. Food must be considered. Equipment needs to remain close enough to reach quickly. Yet beneath all of those preparations lies the first decision. The ground, you kneel and touch it. Dry. Good. You glance toward the western sky. The wind is coming from that direction, carrying the smell of grass and dust. There is something strangely intimate about knowing a landscape this way. You do not merely live upon it, you listen to it. A bent stem of grass may tell you that something passed. A hoofprint may tell you how recently. Birds suddenly leaving a patch of brush may mean nothing. Or they may mean that something disturbed them. The absence of sound can be information too. And as the last light fades, information becomes precious. Far away, perhaps, toward Texas settlements or military posts, soldiers preparing for the night may think of defense in very different terms. They may think of sentries, rifles, picket lines, orders and formations. You think of those things too in your own way. But first you think about distance, wind, water, grass, horses, tracks, the shape of the horizon. The land has already told you whether this is a good place to sleep. You only need to understand what it has said. Darkness finally arrives, not the soft darkness of a modern room where light waits behind a switch. This darkness is enormous. The prairie seems to vanish only a few steps beyond you. The sky fills with stars, thousands of them, bright enough that familiar constellations rise clearly over the horizon. The temperature falls. You draw your covering closer around you. The camp grows quieter, but it is not defenseless. That is the important thing to understand. A Comanche camp in dangerous country does not become safe because everyone hopes nothing will happen. It becomes safer because the preparations for sleep began long before anyone closed their eyes. They began while the sun was still above the horizon. They began with watching, with choosing, with refusing the easiest patch of ground simply because it looked comfortable. And perhaps this is the first strange lesson of sleeping in the wild. The place where you rest is part of your weaponry. The hill, the canyon wall, the open view, the hidden water, even the direction of the wind can protect you without making a sound. Tonight, the earth beneath you is not merely a bed. It is the first guard standing watch. The ground has been chosen. Now comes the harder task, learning what the darkness is trying to tell you. For a while, you remain awake beneath the immense night sky. The camp has settled into a rhythm of small sounds. Hide shifts gently against tippy poles. A horse exhales through its nostrils. Somewhere nearby, dry grass bends beneath a careful foot. Nothing sounds alarming. That does not mean nothing is there. On the southern plains, darkness does not erase the landscape. It merely changes the way you read it. During daylight, you trust your eyes. At night, you begin trusting almost everything else. The wind reaches you first. It moves over the prairie, carrying more than cold air. It can bring the smell of damp ground, distant rain, smoke, horses, animals, and sometimes people. You turn your face slightly toward it. This habit seems simple until you imagine living in a world where a faint trace of smoke might mean another camp lies beyond the horizon. There is no map glowing beside you. No distant electric light marks a settlement. Beyond the camp is darkness, and beyond that darkness may be miles upon miles of open country. The wind becomes a messenger, and like most messengers, it must be questioned carefully. Smoke might come from enemies, or hunters, or a prairie fire. The smell of horses might mean a nearby herd, though the animals could belong to people you would rather not meet. A Comanche warrior cannot simply notice these things. He must place them beside everything else he already knows. Which way has the wind been blowing? Where is the nearest water? Were tracks seen earlier? Did scouts report movement? Has game been unusually disturbed? One clue rarely tells the whole story. Several clues together might. This knowledge does not appear overnight. A boy raised among the Comanche grows into it. He watches older people, he rides with them, he listens. He learns that tracks are not merely marks in dirt, they are events that happened. A hoof print pressed deeply into soft ground tells one kind of story, a shallow print tells another. A broken plant, disturbed dust, or fresh dung may suggest how recently horses passed even without seeing the riders themselves. You can begin to imagine their movement, and that matters because your enemies may be doing exactly the same thing with your trail. There is an uncomfortable fairness to the plains. Everyone leaves signs, the skilled traveler simply leaves fewer of them and notices more. Before nightfall, people moving with the camp have already studied the country behind them. Perhaps a rider has doubled back to inspect the trail. Perhaps scouts have moved toward higher ground. Perhaps someone has spent long minutes looking at what, to an inexperienced eye, seems like absolutely nothing. The horizon, empty grass, a distant ridge. Then he notices dust. It may be faint, just a pale discoloration against the sky. But dust means movement, and movement deserves attention. You begin to see why choosing the campsite was only the first part of preparing for sleep. The land must continue to be read after the camp is established. Even the animals participate. Horses are particularly useful. A resting horse may hear or smell something long before you do. Its head rises, its ears turn, the body becomes still. A person unfamiliar with horses might barely notice. You notice. You look in the same direction, perhaps nothing follows. The horse relaxes again. So do you. But not completely. A camp surrounded by alert animals possesses a kind of living alarm system, although no one would have thought of it in such mechanical terms. Dogs could also react to unfamiliar movement or scent. Birds might suddenly become noisy. Coyotes calling in the distance could be ordinary companions of the night. The trick is knowing what belongs. That may be the deepest skill of all, not hearing every sound as danger, hearing the sound that does not fit. Imagine lying awake long enough that the ordinary noises become familiar. The breathing of people nearby, the shifting horses, the low crackle of a carefully managed fire, if one has been permitted, the wind moving against the hide covering, your own breathing. Then something changes. A horse farther away snorts. Another answers. There is movement near the herd. Your hand moves almost automatically toward what lies beside you. You listen for several heartbeats. The world seems completely still. Then the sound comes again. Perhaps it is only another horse moving through the grass. Perhaps an animal has wandered too close. Perhaps one of the people watching the herd is passing nearby. The camp does not erupt into panic. That would create its own danger. Instead, someone checks. Quietly. This calm response is important. Survival is not the same thing as fear. If every rustle sends a warrior leaping to his feet, he will be exhausted before morning. The purpose of preparation is almost the opposite. It allows rest because certain dangers have already been anticipated. You know where the horses are. You know which direction the wind is coming from. Scouts are watching beyond the immediate camp. You know your equipment is close, and because these things have been considered, you can eventually close your eyes. Not carelessly, but calmly. Farther south and east, beyond Comanche country, life follows different nighttime rhythms. In settlements across Texas, wooden doors close. In military camps, sentries walk prescribed routes. In places such as New Mexico, travelers gather close to fires. Different societies create different forms of security. Here, security remains mobile. Nothing is meant to hold this camp forever. That is worth remembering. The teepee can come down, belongings can be packed, horses can be gathered, the people can leave. A campsite that feels safe tonight may be abandoned tomorrow without regret. There is little value in defending a patch of dirt merely because you slept there once. The important things can move: family, horses, weapons, knowledge. This mobility frustrated generations of enemies who expected power to occupy permanent places. European empires understood towns, they understood forts, they understood roads connecting settlements. A mobile people presented a different problem. You could reach a place where a Comanche camp had stood and discover almost nothing useful. Cold ashes, tracks, trampled grass, perhaps discarded material. The people themselves were already elsewhere, and they might know you were following. The southern plains magnified this advantage. Distances were enormous. Water could be uncertain. Weather could punish an army as effectively as warriors could. A military column needed supplies. Wagons slowed movement. Horses and mules needed grass. Men needed water. Every additional person created another mouth and another set of tracks. A small mounted group could move differently. That difference becomes especially clear at night. You cannot merely think about where an enemy is. You must think about where he can be tomorrow. This is why the camp remains temporary even while people sleep. Nothing is allowed to become too comfortable to abandon. You look toward the dark shapes of the tipis. Their form is beautifully suited to this life. Poles rise and meet above coverings of hide or, in later periods, other available materials. Inside, the enclosed space protects against wind and weather while still allowing a central fire under suitable conditions. But the shelter is not a house. That distinction matters. A house asks you to return. A tipi can travel with you. When the camp moves, the structure moves too. The landscape changes. Home continues. There is something almost dreamlike about this when viewed from the modern world, where home is so often imagined as a fixed address. Here, home may stand beside one creek tonight, and miles away several days later. The stars remain familiar. The people remain familiar. The horses remain familiar. The ground changes beneath them. Perhaps your ancestors, wherever they lived, once understood something similar. For much of human history, darkness was not separated from nature by glass windows and electric lamps. People heard weather approaching, they watched the moon. They knew the smell of rain. They noticed when animals behaved strangely. Night was not empty time between one working day and the next. It was another environment to understand. And tonight, lying in Comanche, you understand it a little better. The earth beneath your bedding still carries some warmth left by the day. Above you, the stars seem impossibly bright. The wind remains steady. No strange smell arrives with it. The horses have settled. Whatever disturbed them earlier has passed. Your muscles finally begin to loosen. Yet before sleep takes you, there is one more thought worth keeping. The Comanche warrior does not survive the night by conquering the wilderness. He survives by refusing to imagine that the wilderness needs conquering. The wind is useful, the hills are useful, the behavior of horses is useful. Water, grass, tracks, clouds, birds, dust, and silence all contain information. The land is not the empty space between destinations. It is the thing that tells you whether you will reach the next destination at all. And so your first night on the southern plains ends not with a wall around you, but with awareness. You have chosen your ground. You have listened to the wind. You have watched the animals. You have learned the sounds that belong to the night. Only then do you permit your eyes to close, but somewhere close by, another pair of eyes remains open, because the ground can protect a sleeping warrior only so far, and the most precious creature in the camp is still standing on four legs. Let us leave the open ground behind for a moment and move closer to the faint shapes of the horses, where the next part of the nighttime ritual is already beginning. For before a Comanche warrior can truly sleep, he must know that when morning comes or danger arrives before it, he will still have a horse beneath him. Let us leave the open ground behind for a moment and move closer to the faint shapes of the horses, where the next part of the nighttime ritual is already beginning. The camp is quiet now. You hear the soft tearing sound of grass being pulled from the earth. A horse chews slowly, pauses, then lowers its head again. Another stamps one hoof against the ground, irritated perhaps by an insect or by some small creature moving through the grass. To modern eyes, these horses might appear to be livestock. To you, they are something much more important. They are movement, they are food when hunting succeeds because of them. They are wealth, they are prestige, they are the difference between catching an enemy and watching him disappear. And on a bad night, they may be the difference between escaping alive and dying beneath an enormous empty sky. So before you sleep, you think about your horse. Not all horses are equal. A large camp may possess many animals, and an accomplished warrior may own several. Some carry belongings, Some are useful for ordinary travel, some may be traded, others are suited to hunting buffalo. Then there is the horse you trust when people begin shooting at you. That animal is different. A good war horse must respond quickly. It must tolerate confusion, shouting, sudden movement, weapons, and the terrifying disorder of mounted combat. It must understand pressure from the rider's legs and shifts in body weight. The relationship between rider and horse becomes extraordinarily close because the rider may need both hands free. A bow cannot be used well if one hand is constantly occupied with reins, so horsemanship becomes something almost difficult to separate from the warrior himself. You do not simply sit upon the animal, you move together. European and American observers repeatedly noticed the extraordinary riding abilities of plains peoples, and Comanche horsemanship became especially famous. Children learned young. A boy growing up in Comanche society encountered horses not as distant animals kept behind fences, but as part of ordinary existence. He watched older riders. He learned balance. He learned how a horse moved when calm and how that movement changed when frightened. Over time, the animal beneath him became as familiar as the ground beneath his own feet. This familiarity mattered most when things went wrong. And things could go wrong very quickly at night. Imagine an enemy raid entering camp before dawn. There is shouting, dogs bark, horses scream, people wake confused. In such a moment, the warrior, whose best horse is somewhere beyond the camp, faces an immediate problem. First, he must reach it. Then he must catch it. Then he must mount, all while frightened animals are running through darkness. That may take minutes. Minutes are far too long. So the most valuable horses are kept close. Historical accounts describe Comanche warriors taking exceptional care to protect favored mounts, sometimes keeping them immediately beside their sleeping places or securing them so closely that any disturbance would wake the owner. The precise arrangements could vary according to circumstance, camp, weather, and danger, but the principle remains simple. The horse you need for escape must not be allowed to disappear while you sleep. You crouch beside yours. The animal knows you. Its body is warm beneath your hand. There is a smell of sweat, hide, grass, and dust. You check the tether. Rawhide and rope are ordinary materials, but tonight they hold something more valuable than almost anything else you own. The horse turns its head toward you. Perhaps you whisper. Perhaps you say nothing. There is no need to make this sentimental. Dependence can create its own kind of intimacy. Your horse carries you farther in a day than your legs could carry you. It helps you hunt. It allows you to follow migrating buffalo herds. It allows you to raid across extraordinary distances. It allows you to retreat before a larger force can surround you. Without it, the geography of Comancheria changes completely. Distances that are manageable on horseback become dangerous on foot. Water that lies a comfortable ride away becomes painfully distant. An enemy who could never catch you suddenly can. This is why horse theft carries such enormous importance on the plains. To steal a horse is not merely to acquire property. You are taking movement from another person and giving movement to yourself. You are reducing his reach while increasing your own. For young men, successful horse raids could also bring status. Courage, skill, patience, and horsemanship all mattered. A raid might involve traveling far into enemy territory, watching carefully, waiting for the right moment, then taking horses without allowing the owners enough time to respond. Sometimes the most successful raid was the one in which almost no fighting occurred. A warrior who could enter hostile country, remove valuable animals and return safely had demonstrated something more useful than reckless bravery. He had demonstrated control, and so every Comanche camp understood the danger. What you did to other people could be done to you. The darkness that helped your own raiders approach an enemy herd could conceal enemy raiders approaching yours. Tonight, therefore, the horses cannot simply wander. Some may graze under supervision, others are kept closer. The best mounts receive particular attention. The camp's sleeping arrangements and the herd's location are connected. You want grazing. But you do not want the animals so far away that a raiding party can cut them off. You want enough space that they can feed, but you also want to hear them. Again, the landscape demands compromise. There is another problem. Horses themselves are noisy when frightened. A sudden raid against the herd can turn hundreds of animals into chaos. Hooves strike hard ground, tethers pull tight, animals collide, dust rises even in darkness. A carefully sleeping camp can become a place of confusion within moments. Experienced raiders know this. Creating panic among enemy horses can be a weapon. You remember perhaps stories told around the fire about military columns whose animals were scattered in darkness. A mounted army without mounts becomes a very different army. Colonel Ranald Mackenzie's campaign in the early 1870s offers a striking example. During operations in West Texas, Mackenzie's forces pursued Comanche groups through country. The soldiers struggled to understand as well as the people they were hunting. In Blanco Canyon, Comanche warriors watched the military column closely. The soldiers had numbers. They had firearms, they had organized command, but they also had horses and mules. And those animals were vulnerable. The Comanche understood that immediately. During a nighttime action, warriors succeeded in driving away valuable army animals, including mounts important to the cavalry. For soldiers accustomed to thinking of combat as men firing weapons at other men, this kind of attack could feel almost indirect. It was not attack the horse, and you attack the soldier's ability to pursue. Take enough horses and you alter the entire campaign. The same logic applies tonight in your camp. Your bow matters, your arrows matter, your courage matters. But if danger comes from beyond that dark ridge, your horse may matter first. You run your hand once more along the animal's neck. Its ears move towards some distant sound. You stop, listen, nothing. The ears relax. So does your hand. Beyond the immediate camp, other horses form darker shapes against the grass. People are watching them. Someone will continue watching while others sleep. This is not glamorous work. There is no cheering, no battle song, no dramatic charge across the plains. Mostly there is waiting, cold feet, stiff legs, wind, the smell of animals, hours in which nothing happens. But history is often preserved by people doing dull things carefully. A sleepy guard who stays awake can save an entire camp. A properly tied horse can carry its owner away from danger. A warrior who spends a few extra moments checking a tether may never know whether those moments saved his life. That uncertainty is part of the ritual. Preparation does not guarantee danger will come. Preparation allows you to sleep even though it might. The horse beside you lowers its head. The night deepens. You return toward your sleeping place, knowing the animal remains close enough to hear. And perhaps this is the quiet truth behind the famous image of the Comanche horse warrior. The extraordinary riding seen in daylight depends upon careful habits practiced after sunset. The charge begins with the tether. The escape begins with where the horse is placed. Freedom across the plains depends in part upon making certain that four warm legs are still waiting when you open your eyes, but your own horse is only one animal. Beyond it lies the larger herd, and somewhere outside the reach of the firelight, another warrior is awake, staring into the darkness, knowing that an enemy does not need to kill anyone tonight to cause disaster. He only needs to take the horses. The horse beside you is safe. The herd is another matter. Beyond the nearest tippies, the darkness spreads across the grass until individual animals become difficult to distinguish. A horse, standing still, can disappear almost completely. You may see the pale curve of a back when it catches the starlight, or the sudden movement of a head. Mostly, however, you know the herd is there because you can hear it. Grass tears between teeth. Hooves shift against dry earth. An animal exhales. Then everything becomes quiet again. Somewhere near the herd, a watcher waits. His task is simple to describe and difficult to perform. Stay awake, watch the horses, listen for anything that does not belong. There may be no attack tonight. There may be no attack for many nights. The greatest enemy may simply be exhaustion. The human body wants sleep, especially after a long day of riding. Especially when the air has become cold and the darkness seems to make the entire world slower. A guard cannot surrender to that feeling. Because the herd is not merely a collection of animals, it is the camp's ability to move. If enemies take enough horses, families may be stranded. Hunters may lose the speed needed to pursue buffalo effectively. Warriors may be unable to chase raiders or escape soldiers. Even the ordinary labor of moving camp becomes harder. so the herd must be protected. This creates a strange nighttime balance. The horses need grass. Keeping every animal tied close to the tipis would make feeding difficult. A large herd consumes an astonishing amount. Animals need room to graze, and the camp may depend upon them remaining healthy enough to travel again in the morning. But every step away from the sleeping camp creates vulnerability. A horse grazing far out in the darkness is easier to steal. A horse tied beside a sleeping warrior is safer but cannot feed freely. The solution is not one perfect arrangement. It is layers, favored horses close, other animals farther out, people watching, scouts beyond them, and the land itself beyond everyone. You begin to understand that a Comanche camp does not have a single defensive wall. It has circles of awareness. At the center are sleeping families, around them are shelters, equipment, and selected horses. Beyond them are more animals. Beyond those animals may be watchers. Farther still, scouts may move through the surrounding country. The enemy must pass through these layers without creating a sign. That is difficult, not impossible. The Comanche themselves are proof of that. Horse raiding has long been part of conflict on the plains, and successful raiders learn patience. The foolish thief rushes toward the herd. The skilled one watches. He studies the camp before approaching. Where are the dogs? Where are the guards? Which direction is the wind blowing? Which animals appear valuable? How can they be moved without immediately alarming every horse around them? Perhaps most importantly, where is the escape route? Stealing the horse is only half the problem. You must still get away. The Comanche became feared for exactly this kind of mobility. A raiding party could travel long distances, strike where its enemies felt secure, and then disappear across country that seemed empty to outsiders. The horse made these distances possible. But the skill lay in knowing how to use the horse without exhausting it unnecessarily. A dead horse carries no one home. A badly exhausted horse may fail when pursuit begins. So a warrior learns not only how to ride fast, but when not to ride fast. That is a quieter kind of knowledge. Tonight, the herd guard understands it. He does not disturb the animals without reason. A calm herd is easier to read. If one horse suddenly raises its head, that means something. If several animals turn in the same direction, that means more. If the entire herd becomes restless, everyone needs to know. The horses are listening with him. Perhaps that is why the darkness feels less lonely. You are surrounded by hundreds of ears better suited to hearing the night than your own. A horse catches sounds you miss. It smells what you cannot smell. Its body may react before your mind understands why. The watcher learns to trust this without allowing every movement to frighten him. There, a horse lifts its head. Another does the same. Both look toward the north. The guard straightens. For a moment he hears only wind, then a faint sound, a scrape, perhaps a hoof, perhaps something else. He waits. There is no shout, no unnecessary alarm. He moves carefully enough that the sleeping camp remains mostly undisturbed. The sound comes again then. From somewhere in the grass, a small animal darts away. The horses relax. Nothing follows. The watcher settles again. This may happen many times before dawn. Most warnings lead nowhere. That does not make the watching pointless. The one warning ignored may be the one that matters. And Comanche history contains enough examples of successful nighttime raids to make that danger very real. The raid at Blanco Canyon in the early 1870s shows how devastating an attack on animals could become. Colonel Ranald Mackenzie's military force entered the country searching for Comanche camps. Yet the people being hunted were not simply waiting to be discovered. Comanche scouts observed the soldiers, they watched movement, they gathered information. And when an opportunity appeared, warriors struck the military camp at night. The result was confusion among the army's animals and the loss of valuable horses and mules for cavalry. This was particularly humiliating. A cavalryman's strength depends upon remaining mounted. Take his horse and the proud rider becomes a man wearing heavy equipment in difficult country. The Comanche understood this because their own survival rested on the same truth. A horse is speed stored in living muscle. It is distance waiting to be crossed. This explains why nighttime horse protection could never be treated as an afterthought. The great herd beyond the tipis is almost like a treasury without walls. Every animal represents labor, trade, hunting ability, prestige, and movement. Some have been raised within the community. Others may have been acquired through exchange. Others may have come from raids against enemies or settlements. Their histories are different. Their importance tonight is the same. Keep them. Morning is still several hours away. The cold grows sharper before dawn. The watcher pulls his covering more tightly around his shoulders. His eyes hurt. The stars appear to have moved, though of course it is the earth carrying everyone beneath them. Time passes slowly when your only duty is to remain awake. There are no heroic songs about this particular moment. No one will remember the night if nothing happens, and that is precisely the point. The best night guard creates a story nobody needs to tell. The horses remain, the camp wakes, life continues. History often remembers disasters because disasters leave records: a raid, a battle, a stolen herd, a burned camp. But countless successful nights disappear completely. No attack occurred, no horse vanished, no one died. People simply woke before dawn and began another day. Those forgotten nights are perhaps the clearest evidence that the system worked. You stir beneath your covering. Somewhere in the darkness, the watcher is still awake for you. Your favored horse remains close. Your weapons are nearby. For a little while longer, you can sleep. Yet the herd carries another danger that cannot be solved with guards alone. If the camp itself announces its position across the plains, enemies do not need to discover tracks. They need only look toward the horizon. A bright fire can be seen from far away in open country. Smoke can betray a campsite during daylight. Even scent can travel with the wind. Warmth, cooked food, and light are comforting things. Comforting enough to make a tired traveler careless. The Comanche cannot afford that carelessness. And so the next preparation for sleep begins with a decision that feels almost cruel on a cold night. Sometimes, the safest fire is no fire at all. We drift onward now, away from the breathing herd and toward the center of camp, where darkness itself is about to become part of the defense. We drift onward now, away from the breathing herd and toward the center of camp, where darkness itself is about to become part of the defense. The night has grown colder. You can feel it first in your hands. During the day, the southern plains can seem almost merciless beneath the sun. Heat rises from the ground, dust settles on skin and clothing. The horizon trembles. But once the sun disappears, warmth can leave the open country with surprising speed. And naturally, your first thought is fire. Fire means warmth. It means cooked meat. It means light enough to see familiar faces. It means a small circle in which darkness can be pushed away. For thousands of years, human beings have gathered around fires for precisely these reasons. Tonight, however, fire carries another meaning. It means, here we are. You look toward the faint glow near the center of camp. It is small, deliberately small. No great pile of wood burns beneath the stars. No flames leap high enough to illuminate the tipis from a distance. The people around it do not need a bonfire. They need enough. That distinction can keep people alive. On the open plains, there may be little to interrupt a distant line of sight. A glow visible against darkness can reveal the position of a camp to someone watching from far away during daylight. Smoke creates a similar problem. A thin column rising into a clear sky may be visible long before the people responsible for it can be seen. And so before sleep, the Comanche warrior must consider something that feels almost unnatural. How much comfort is worth the risk? Tonight, the answer may be very little. The people of the camp know how to live without the constant presence of a large fire. Food does not always need to be prepared at the moment it is eaten. Dried meat can travel. Food prepared earlier can be carried. In dangerous country, a cold meal may be preferable to a warm meal that tells an enemy exactly where to find you. You sit near the small fire for a while. Its heat touches only one side of your body. The other side remains cold. Someone adds a little fuel, not much. Dry material is valuable because damp or green wood may produce more visible smoke. The flames rise briefly, then settle again. Around you, people speak quietly. Beyond the glow, The camp disappears. A few steps away, a teepee becomes only a dark shape. A little farther, even that shape vanishes. This is what you want. Darkness is inconvenient. It is also protection. A person approaching the camp must now search for you. You have not drawn a bright mark upon the prairie. You have not sent a pillar of smoke upward. You have allowed the night to cover you. It is easy to imagine people in the past loving fire simply because fire was useful. But useful things can still be dangerous. A flame consumes fuel. It creates smoke. It produces smell. It throws light onto faces and objects. And once your eyes adjust to that light, the darkness beyond it becomes harder to read. That last problem is especially important. Sit beside a bright fire and look outward. At first, you see almost nothing. Your pupils have adjusted to the flames. Someone standing beyond the light may see you clearly while remaining invisible himself. You become the illuminated figure. He becomes the darkness. A warrior who expects danger has little reason to enjoy that arrangement. So the fire remains low. Perhaps tonight it will be extinguished before most people sleep. The embers can be covered. The camp can become almost completely dark. You may dislike the cold. You may miss the warmth. But survival on the plains often involves choosing the discomfort you understand over the danger you cannot see. The United States Army would learn versions of this lesson during its campaigns against native peoples across the West. A large military column was difficult to hide. Hundreds of men produced tracks. Wagons marked the earth. Animals left dung. Metal equipment made noise. Cooking created smoke. Campfires created light. Even when commanders tried to move secretly, the force itself announced its presence in countless small ways. Comanche scouts needed only to notice enough of those signs. Colonel Ranald Mackenzie's expedition into Blanco Canyon in 1871 illustrates the problem particularly well. Mackenzie was aggressive, persistent, and willing to pursue Comanche groups into difficult country, but the army and its enemies understood the landscape differently. While the soldiers searched for the Comanche scouts observed the soldiers. That reversal is important. The hunters believed they were hunting. The people being hunted were watching them. Mackenzie's campfires made the imbalance worse. In darkness, light can become a map. The military camp had made itself easier to locate. Comanche warriors could observe, wait, plan, then approach under cover of night. The attack that followed focused heavily on the army's animals. Horses and mules broke loose amid confusion, and valuable mounts were taken. You can imagine how different the night must have felt afterward. A few hours earlier, the campfires had represented normal military life, warm food, light, routine. After the raid, those same fires must have seemed rather less comforting. They had helped reveal exactly where the soldiers were. The lesson is not that the Comanche never used fire, they did. Fire was essential for warmth, cooking, ceremonies, and ordinary domestic life. The important point is adaptability. A safe camp can behave differently from a war party moving through hostile territory. Winter demands different choices from summer. Canyon country differs from open prairie. A large family camp has needs that a handful of mounted warriors do not. There is no single rule saying fire is forbidden. Instead, there is a question. What does the land allow tonight? That question appears again and again in Comanche survival. You do not force one routine onto every landscape. You adjust. If terrain hides the glow, a fire may be less dangerous. If enemies are believed to be nearby, darkness becomes more valuable. If bitter cold threatens people more immediately than discovery does, warmth may win. Survival is rarely a neat list. It is judgment. You notice the wind again. Earlier, it told you about weather and movement. Now it tells you where smoke will travel. A warrior may consider not only whether a fire can be seen, but whether it can be smelled. Wood smoke carries. Anyone who has walked through cold night air knows how suddenly the scent can appear. You may smell a chimney or campfire long before you see its source. On the plains, where familiar scents are fewer and the air can travel across broad open country, an unexpected trace of smoke deserves attention. That works both ways. If you can smell someone else's fire, someone else may smell yours. So you learn to think like the person searching for you. Where would he look? What would he hear? What would he smell? What mistake are you making that seems harmless from inside the camp? This is perhaps the most uncomfortable form of preparation. You must imagine your own vulnerability. The fire sinks lower. Red embers pulse beneath grey ash. Someone moves a piece of fuel inward. No one replaces it. Soon the flame disappears altogether. For a moment, your eyes seem useless. Darkness fills everything. You wait. Slowly, the world returns. Stars emerge with greater brilliance. The pale ground becomes visible. You can distinguish the black shapes of nearby shelters. A person walking several steps away becomes a moving shadow. Your eyes have adapted now. The darkness no longer feels empty. It has texture. You hear more because you are no longer staring into flames. The horses seem louder. The wind seems closer. A piece of hide shifts. Somewhere far away, a coyote calls. Another answers, "You sit," without speaking. There is a peculiar comfort in becoming difficult to see. Perhaps an enemy is somewhere beyond the horizon. Perhaps not. Either way, you have given him one less clue. No bright flame, no tall smoke, no unnecessary beacon. The camp is becoming part of the night. This ability to disappear would frustrate outsiders for generations. Military forces could ride toward a reported camp, only to find abandoned ground. Settlers might hear that Comanche warriors had passed through an area without ever seeing them. A raiding party could seem to emerge suddenly and vanish just as quickly. There was nothing magical about it. Mobility mattered. Horsemanship mattered. Knowledge of water and terrain mattered. Scouting mattered. And so did hundreds of quiet decisions like the one made tonight. Do not make more light than you need. Do not make more smoke than you need. Do not announce yourself merely because warmth feels pleasant. The safest camp is sometimes the camp a stranger rides past without realizing anyone is there. You finally move away from the dead fire. The earth beneath the ashes still holds warmth. By morning, perhaps only a faint patch of grey will remain. You return toward your sleeping place. The darkness now feels almost protective, but darkness can conceal enemies as easily as it conceals you. A hidden camp still needs eyes beyond its edge. And while you prepare to sleep, several warriors may be moving farther into the surrounding country. Away from the warmth, away from the voices, away even from the smell of the horses. They are going where the camp cannot see. Because somewhere beyond this circle of darkness, another set of tracks may already be approaching. The fire has disappeared. Now the camp must see without it. Beyond the last tipi, beyond the nearest horses, the prairie opens into darkness. Somewhere out there, a warrior is moving slowly across the ground. He is not lost. He is listening. You remain near the sleeping camp while he rides farther away, until even the soft beat of his horse's hooves can no longer be heard. This is the next layer of protection, scouts. A camp that depends only upon what can be seen from its center has already allowed danger to come too close. The Comanche understand this well, so the eyes of the camp move outward. A scout may climb toward higher ground before darkness becomes complete. From there, he can study the surrounding country while the last light remains. He watches trails, he watches water, he watches distant ridges, he watches for dust. He notices birds rising unexpectedly. And most of all, he looks for signs that someone else has entered the landscape. This work begins before sunset because daylight reveals things that darkness will soon hide. A distant group of riders may appear only as small shapes. Dust may hang above them. A reflection may briefly flash from metal. Tracks may cross a trail where none existed earlier. None of these signs needs to mean danger, but each deserves attention. The scout gathers them like pieces of a story. Then darkness comes. The story becomes harder to read. Now sound matters more. You can imagine him stopping his horse on a rise. He sits quietly. The animal beneath him breathes. Wind moves through the grass. Nothing else. He waits. Patience is one of the least dramatic and most useful qualities in warfare. A person who cannot tolerate stillness begins inventing reasons to move. Movement creates noise. Noise reveals position, so the scout waits, perhaps for a very long time. The landscape does not hurry for him. Eventually something changes. A sound reaches him from far away. Hooves, maybe. He turns his head. There it is again. Not loud, Not close. He does not immediately race back toward camp. First, he needs to know more. One rider, several, horses moving freely, buffalo, the difference matters. He may shift position to hear better. He may move downwind. He may wait for another sound. The purpose of scouting is not simply to announce danger. It is to reduce uncertainty. An alarm saying enemies are coming is useful. A warning explaining where they are, how many there may be, and which direction they are traveling is far more useful. This ability gave mounted Comanche groups an enormous advantage against enemies who were less familiar with the southern plains. The events around Blanco Canyon in 1871 demonstrate the point. Colonel Ranald Mackenzie entered the region with hundreds of soldiers and scouts. From the Army's perspective, the objective was straightforward: find the Comanche, force contact, prevent them from disappearing again. Yet the landscape did not cooperate. More precisely, the Comanche used the landscape better. Their scouts detected Mackenzie's force. Then they watched it. This is one of those moments in history where it is useful to imagine the situation from above. A large military column moves through difficult country believing it is searching for a hidden enemy. Around that column, a handful of riders observe its progress. The large force cannot see them. The small force can see the large one, who is really hunting whom. Comanche scouts could remain at a distance, exploiting terrain and superior familiarity with the country. They could observe direction, speed, numbers, camp routine. They could notice mistakes. Then they could carry that information back. The sleeping camp, therefore, possessed something Mackenzie's soldiers desperately wanted: time. Time to move. Time to prepare. Time to attack first. This is why a scout miles from camp belongs to the nighttime sleeping routine, just as surely as the blanket beneath your body. He makes sleep possible. You cannot see him. That is almost the point. If you can see your outer watcher clearly from the center of camp, he probably is not far enough away to provide much warning. The scout exists somewhere between you and whatever might be coming. And he must avoid becoming the warning himself. If an enemy catches him, the camp may learn nothing. So he moves carefully. A skilled scout understands concealment not as a single trick, but as a collection of habits. Do not silhouette yourself unnecessarily against the sky. Do not ride noisily across hard ground if a quieter route exists. Do not assume an empty landscape is actually empty. Look behind you. Watch the wind. Know where water lies. Remember which ground offers escape if someone suddenly appears. These are small decisions. Together they create invisibility. Not literal invisibility, of course. Something more useful: the ability to remain unnoticed by people who are looking. Back in camp, you know little of this. That may seem strange. Your safety depends upon events happening beyond your sight. But that is true of almost every protected sleeping place in human history. Behind a city wall, someone guards the gate. On a ship, someone takes the night watch. In a military camp, sentries walk while others sleep. Here the wall moves on horseback. You roll onto your side. The ground is firm beneath you. The air has grown colder. You hear no alarm. That absence means something. No rider has returned at speed. No warning call has passed through camp. The horses remain mostly calm. So your breathing slows. Far outside the camp, however, the scout is still watching. Perhaps he notices something before midnight. A distant glow, very faint. It appears near the horizon and disappears, then appears again. Fire. He waits. A star would remain higher in the sky. Lightning would be brighter. This glow sits low. Perhaps another camp is there. Who? That question cannot yet be answered. He watches longer. The glow disappears completely. Maybe whoever made it has covered the fire. Maybe the terrain has hidden it. Maybe there was never a fire at all. The scout now has a decision. Return with uncertain information. Move closer. Remain where he is. Every choice contains risk. Move closer, and he may discover the answer. Move too close, and someone may discover him. This is the strange mathematics of scouting. Knowledge has a price. The more you want, the closer you may have to approach danger. Eventually he turns his horse. Not toward the glow, toward camp. The return is quiet. No dramatic gallop. There is no reason to wake everyone. He reaches the outer edge and reports what he saw. A possible distant fire. Direction known. distance uncertain, no sign of immediate approach. The information moves to the people who need it. Perhaps another scout is sent to watch that direction. Perhaps nothing changes. That is also part of survival. Not every uncertain sign requires abandoning camp in the middle of the night. People still need rest. Horses still need grazing. Children still need sleep. If every possibility caused panic, an enemy would barely need to attack. Exhaustion would do the work instead. So the camp absorbs the information. Someone remains alert. Most people continue sleeping. The balance between vigilance and rest is delicate. Too little vigilance and danger arrives unnoticed. Too much, and nobody has strength left when morning comes. You close your eyes again. Hours pass. The stars move westward. The cold deepens. Then, before dawn, something wakes you. At first you do not know what. There was no shout, no gunshot, no scream. Yet the camp feels different. You lie still. Then you hear it, a quiet voice outside. Another answers. Someone has returned. You sit up. Your hand moves toward the place where your equipment waits. The horses are restless, but not panicked. That matters. There is movement near several shelters now. Still no shouting. Whatever has happened has not yet become an attack. A scout has found tracks. Fresh ones. Several riders have passed at some distance during the night. The direction is uncertain. The camp is not immediately threatened. But now everyone knows that other people are nearby. Sleep becomes lighter. Some warriors remain awake. Equipment is checked. Horses are brought closer. And you begin to understand how quickly the quiet rituals of nighttime can become preparation for combat. There is no need to wait until an enemy appears. By then, it may already be too late. The warning begins with a hoofprint, a broken stem, a distant glow, a nervous horse, a sound that does not belong. These fragments travel inward from the landscape until they reach the sleeping warrior. And once they do, his next movements are almost automatic. The bow must be where his hand expects it. The arrows must be ready. The lance cannot be buried beneath bedding and belongings. Darkness is not the time to search for the things that may keep you alive. Morning is still some distance away. You settle back down. But now your hand rests near your bow. The camp has not moved. No enemy has appeared. Perhaps no one will. Yet something has changed. The possibility of danger has crossed from the distant prairie into your sleeping place. And so we leave the scouts watching the horizon and move inward once more toward the warrior lying beneath his covering. Beside him are the objects he hopes not to use tonight. Bow, arrows, lance, shield, they are quiet now. But they are not put away. For on the southern plains, preparing to sleep also means preparing to wake in the middle of a fight. Now we move from the distant scouts back into the sleeping camp, where danger has been reduced to a few quiet objects lying within reach. Bow, arrows, lance, shield. You hope none of them will be needed before sunrise. But hope is not a plan. The night remains cold, and somewhere beyond the camp fresh tracks have been discovered. They may belong to travelers who have no intention of coming closer. They may belong to enemies. Perhaps by morning, the mystery will solve itself. Until then, you prepare. You do not need much light. In fact, you would rather have none. Your hands already know the objects around you. The bow lies where you expect it. A Comanche bow is compact compared with the long bows familiar from stories of medieval England. That smaller size makes sense on horseback, where a long weapon would be awkward to handle while an animal is running beneath you. A powerful bow can be built from carefully selected materials, and the finished weapon represents far more than wood and sinew. It represents hours of work, experience, maintenance, and familiarity. You have handled it so often that your fingers recognize its shape in darkness. That is important. Imagine waking suddenly. There is shouting outside, a horse screams, someone calls a warning, you are still half inside a dream. This is not the moment to wonder where your bow was placed. So before sleeping, the weapon remains close. Close enough that your hand can find it before your mind is completely awake. The arrows are equally important. A quiver sits nearby. You check it almost without thinking. An arrow is a simple object only from a distance. Look closely and it becomes a collection of decisions. The shaft must be straight. The point must be suitable. The feathers must guide its flight. The finished arrow needs to behave predictably when released. For hunting, accuracy means food. For war, it may mean survival. The Comanche warrior's reputation as a mounted archer grew from years of practice that began early in life. Riding and shooting were not separate skills, performed one after the other. They became one action. A skilled rider could control his horse with his legs and body while leaving his hands free for the bow. He could lean, turn, release, reach for another arrow, release again, all while the horse continued moving. To an infantryman trying to aim a firearm at a fast rider, the experience could be deeply frustrating. The rider was not where he had been a heartbeat earlier, and the horse beneath him could change direction quickly. But tonight, none of that movement exists. Your bow simply rests beside you. The difference between an object at rest and an object in battle is only the speed with which you can reach it. You check the quiver. The arrows are arranged. You do not want loose equipment scattered across the sleeping space. Darkness punishes disorder. A misplaced arrow is merely annoying during daylight. During a sudden attack, it can become something worse. The same is true of the lance. It cannot simply lie where someone will trip over it, nor can it be placed somewhere difficult to reach. The weapon is long, designed for mounted fighting, and its usefulness depends heavily upon the skill of the rider carrying it. Tonight, it rests along the side of the shelter. You know exactly where. If you wake to danger, you do not need to see it. Your hand can find the shaft. This arrangement might sound like constant fear, yet inside the camp, it does not necessarily feel that way. That is one of the strange things about routines created around danger. Once repeated often enough, they become ordinary. A sailor checks ropes, a hunter checks equipment, a traveler checks water, a warrior checks weapons, then he sleeps. The checking may actually make sleep easier. You know the bow is there, you know the horse is close, you know watchers are outside, you know scouts have moved through the surrounding country. Nothing can guarantee safety. But uncertainty has been reduced. That is enough. You lie back. For a few moments, you think of the fresh tracks reported earlier. Who made them? Perhaps another mounted group. Perhaps people passing through the region with entirely different concerns. The southern plains are not empty. Comanche groups move through them, but so do many other peoples. Kiowa communities share close relationships and alliances with the Comanche during important periods. Apache groups have their own long and complicated histories across the region. Mexican traders, hunters, soldiers, settlers, and captives moved through portions of this enormous world. Later, United States military columns pushed deeper into it. Every trail can carry a different story, and not every encounter means battle. Trade matters, diplomacy matters, kinship matters, so does avoidance. The popular image of the Plains warrior can make it seem as though every day is spent fighting. Real life is larger than that. People hunt, repair clothing, raise children, care for animals, prepare food, tell stories, laugh, argue, trade, rest, and sometimes fight. War exists inside life. Life does not exist merely to support war. That distinction becomes particularly clear tonight. Around you are families trying to sleep. A child may turn beneath a covering. Someone coughs, an older person adjusts bedding, a woman checks something near the entrance of the shelter. These are ordinary human sounds. The weapons beside you exist partly to preserve that ordinary life. The bow is not impressive while lying on the ground. The lance is only a dark line. The arrows do not glow with historical importance. They are tools kept ready because danger may arrive. The same principle appears across cultures and centuries. A farmer near York might once have barred his door before sleeping. A traveller between Canterbury and London might have worried about thieves. A household in Normandy might have secured animals before darkness. The threats differ, the landscape differs. The response begins with the same quiet question. What needs to be ready if something happens tonight? For you, the answer includes a horse and weapons. You shift again. Your hand touches the bow, there exactly where it should be. You do not need to think about it anymore. This is the value of habit. A practiced arrangement removes decisions from moments when decisions are difficult. If a warning comes, you will not begin preparing. Preparation has already happened. The warrior who wakes ready has done most of the work before sleeping. Outside, the wind continues. Then a horse makes a sharp sound. Your eyes open. Immediately, for one moment, you remain perfectly still. Another horse answers, then another. Your hand closes around the bow. The camp changes. You hear movement, a low voice. Someone steps outside. Another warrior is already awake. There is no screaming, not yet. You listen. The horses remain restless. A dog gives a short bark, then silence. Your heartbeat feels much louder than everything around you. A voice comes from farther out, not an alarm, a message. The watchers have seen movement near the edge of the herd. Several warriors rise. You do the same. The night air bites immediately. Your horse is close. That preparation now makes sense in a way it did not several moments earlier. You do not need to run through darkness searching for an animal. You do not need to search for your bow, you have it. The lance is where you left it. Your body is awake now. The camp waits. A few long moments pass. Then a rider approaches from the outer darkness. Friendly. One of the watchers. He reports what he has seen. Animals, not men. Perhaps deer disturbed near the grazing horses. Perhaps some other movement in the grass. No enemy appears. The tension loosens. A few quiet words pass between people. The horses settle. You return to your sleeping place. No battle, no raid, no heroic event for anyone to remember. Only preparation followed by nothing. Again. And that may be the most realistic picture of readiness. Most nights, the bow stays beside you and is never fired. Most warnings become ordinary explanations. Most strange sounds fade back into the landscape. Yet you cannot know which night will be different until it becomes different. So the bow stays close every time. The arrows remain ready every time. The horse is protected every time. Repetition is what turns a survival practice into a way of life. You lie down once more, but beside the physical weapons rests something more difficult for an outsider to understand. The shield especially can belong to more than the world of practical defense. For Comanche people, the landscape contains dimensions that cannot be reduced simply to grass, water, weather, and enemies. Dreams matter, visions matter, sacred power matters. Protection can be understood in spiritual as well as physical terms, and a warrior preparing for danger may seek more than the strength of his own hands. The night is already full of things you cannot see: the wind, distant riders, animals moving through grass. Perhaps it is not surprising that the unseen world also has a place here. So we drift onward, deeper into the forgotten night, from the weapons a warrior can touch to the powers he believes he cannot, before his eyes finally close. There may still be another kind of preparation to make. We drift onward, deeper into the forgotten night, from the weapons a warrior can touch to the powers he believes he cannot. The bow lies beside you. The arrows are ready. Your horse is close enough to hear breathing in the darkness. Beyond the camp, watchers remain awake. Everything practical has been considered, and still something remains. You look upward, the sky above the southern plains is almost painfully clear. Without towns glowing against the horizon, without electric lamps, without roads filled with moving lights, the stars seem close enough to belong to the landscape. The Milky Way stretches overhead. The moon, when present, changes the prairie completely. Under a bright moon, riders can travel with surprising confidence. Under a moonless sky, the world contracts into shapes, sounds, smells, and memory. For the Comanche, this is not simply an empty universe hanging above ordinary life. The natural world contains spiritual power. To understand the warrior preparing to sleep, you must enter that world carefully. Not as someone searching for superstition, not as someone trying to turn sacred beliefs into an exotic mystery, but as someone lying beneath the same stars, trying to understand why courage can require more than a sharp weapon. Among the Comanche, spiritual power is often described with the word puha. Puha can be understood as sacred or supernatural power, though any simple English translation risks making the idea smaller than it was. Power could be connected with visions, dreams, animals, natural forces, and individual spiritual experiences. A person might seek guidance through isolation, fasting, prayer, or a vision quest. The experience was deeply personal. What one warrior received did not necessarily belong to another. This matters tonight. Your protection does not come from carrying a generic charm simply because everyone else carries one. Spiritual relationships can be individual. A particular animal may have significance. A dream may contain guidance. A vision received years earlier may continue shaping the way a warrior understands danger. The sacred and the practical do not need to be enemies. That separation belongs more to modern categories than to the world around you. A warrior can check his horse and pray. He can sharpen his awareness of the terrain and trust spiritual protection. He can place his bow within reach and remember a vision. There is no contradiction. All of these actions belong to preparation. You sit quietly. Perhaps you have done this many times, perhaps before a dangerous journey, before a raid, or after an unsettling dream. You become especially attentive to signs. Dreams matter because sleep itself can become a place where guidance arrives. That makes the act of falling asleep rather different from simply turning consciousness off for several hours. The dream may be remembered, its images may be considered. Certain dreams may be understood as warnings or sources of power. The unseen world does not necessarily disappear when the eyes close. In some ways, it becomes more accessible. This gives the nighttime camp another dimension. Outside, the scout watches physical darkness. Inside, the sleeping warrior may enter a spiritual landscape. Both forms of awareness matter. Near you is a shield. A shield is practical equipment. It can protect a warrior from arrows and other weapons. But some shields also possess sacred importance beyond their physical construction. Designs, feathers, coverings, and associated practices can express spiritual experiences and individual power. Such objects are not merely decorations. They can be treated with care because their meaning is inseparable from the protection associated with them. Imagine touching the edge of such an object in darkness. The material is familiar beneath your fingers. Yet what matters most may not be visible at all. The power lies partly in memory, a vision, a story, a relationship with forces beyond ordinary sight. Perhaps the image painted upon a sacred object recalls an animal encountered in a vision. Perhaps feathers carry meanings associated with courage, power, or warfare. To an outsider arriving decades later and placing such an object behind museum glass, the shield might appear to be an artifact to the person who lived with it. That word would feel terribly incomplete. It was part of a life. This is one of the difficulties of studying the past. Museums preserve objects very well. They preserve relationships badly. A bow behind glass no longer bends in a warrior's hand. A saddle no longer smells of horse sweat. A tipi covering no longer moves in the wind. A sacred object removed from ceremony becomes visually present and spiritually difficult for outsiders to interpret. So tonight, instead of imagining a museum case, imagine the object where it belongs. Darkness, grass, cold air, horses, family nearby, possible enemies beyond the horizon. Now its meaning changes. You understand why spiritual confidence can have practical consequences. Fear affects the body. It shortens breathing. It tightens muscles. It makes every sound seem threatening. A warrior overwhelmed by fear sleeps badly and reacts badly. Someone who believes himself protected may remain calmer. That calm can matter. Not because belief stops an arrow, but because a steady person makes better decisions than a panicked one. The spiritual preparation before danger can therefore shape physical behavior without needing to become modern psychology. You do not think in those terms. You pray because prayer belongs here. You remember because memory belongs here. You seek power because the world contains power. Simple enough. The wind moves against the teepee covering. You listen. Earlier tonight, that sound might have made you wonder whether someone was approaching. Now you recognize it. Only wind. Your breathing becomes slower. Perhaps your mind turns toward relatives who are no longer alive. The Comanche world, like every human world, contains grief. Warriors die, children die, parents grow old, disease comes, violence comes, entire camps experience loss. By the middle of the 19th century, pressures upon Comancheria are becoming increasingly severe. The old world has not disappeared yet, but forces are gathering around it. American settlement expands, military posts appear. Buffalo hunting by outsiders will eventually contribute to catastrophic destruction of the great herds upon which plains life depends. Diseases brought through colonial contact have already caused terrible losses among indigenous communities across generations. Treaties are made, treaties fail. Borders imagined by governments cut across landscapes that horses have crossed for generations. You do not know exactly what the future contains. No one ever does. That ignorance is one mercy history grants to the people living inside it. You do not lie awake thinking that historians will later call this the decline of Comanche power. You think about tomorrow. Will the horses have enough grass? Where will water be found? What did the scouts see? Will the weather hold? Will the tracks discovered tonight lead toward danger? History comes later, life comes first. And this is why spiritual preparation before sleep matters so much. Tomorrow is uncertain. Some uncertainties can be reduced. You can choose good terrain, you can guard horses, you can hide your fire, you can post scouts, you can prepare weapons, then you reach the boundary of human control. Beyond that boundary lie chance, weather, sickness, dreams, death, and whatever powers you believe move through the world. Every culture eventually reaches that boundary. A sailor from Cornwall might once have prayed before entering dangerous water. A family in medieval Edinburgh might have asked divine protection during sickness. A traveller crossing Normandy might have carried a sacred token. Different traditions, different explanations, the same human recognition. You cannot control everything. Perhaps your ancestors understood that more easily than we do. The modern world gives people countless ways to create the feeling of control. Schedules, locks, weather forecasts, maps, streetlights, walls, but beneath all of them remains the ancient truth. Night arrives. You become tired. Eventually, you must close your eyes and trust something beyond your own attention. Tonight, you trust many things. The scout on the ridge, the watcher near the herd, the horse beside you. The bow beneath your hand, the terrain chosen before sunset, and powers that cannot be seen. The camp becomes quieter. A child has stopped moving. The horses are calm. No warning comes from the outer darkness. You lie down. Your shield remains nearby. The details painted upon it disappear in the absence of light. Perhaps that is appropriate. Its meaning does not require you to see it. Your eyes close. Sleep arrives slowly, then dreams. What you dream tonight is yours alone. Perhaps an animal crosses the prairie. Perhaps thunder rolls over distant hills. Perhaps you see someone who died years ago. Perhaps there is only darkness. By morning you may remember, you may not. But for these few hours, practical preparation and spiritual preparation have met in the same place, beside a sleeping human being. And when you wake, the first thing you hear is not an enemy, it is a bird. A small sound, then another. The eastern horizon has begun to pale. You have survived another night. No battle was fought, no horse was stolen, no arrow was released. The scouts did not need to race home with a warning. Your weapons remain beside you untouched. From the viewpoint of history, nothing happened. From the viewpoint of the people waking around you, everything important happened. Everyone is still here. That is the quiet victory. Soon, the camp begins to stir. Ashes are checked. Horses move. People speak. The darkness that protected you is fading, and the familiar landscape slowly returns. Yet our night is not quite finished. We drift onward now into the final hours before sunrise, when a Comanche camp begins the delicate transformation from a sleeping community into a moving one, because survival does not end when you wake. The same land that sheltered you through the darkness now asks another question. How quickly can you disappear before someone else arrives? We drift onward now into the final hours before sunrise, when a Comanche camp begins the delicate transformation from a sleeping community into a waking one. At first, almost nothing changes. The darkness remains. The stars are still bright overhead. The prairie is still cold. The horses still stand as dark shapes beyond the shelters, and the wind still carries the smell of grass, hide, dust, and animals. But somewhere in the east, the black horizon has softened, only slightly. You would miss it if you were not looking. A thin grayness has appeared beneath the stars. Morning is coming. You wake before the sun. There is no bell, no clock, no shouted order. Your body has learned the rhythm of the camp, and the camp has learned the rhythm of the sky. Around you, other people begin to move. Someone coughs, a covering rustles. A child turns over and attempts to steal a few more moments of sleep. Outside, a horse shakes itself with a heavy flutter of hide and mane. The sound seems enormous in the stillness. You lie quietly for another moment. This is perhaps the safest part of the night, or perhaps the most dangerous. Dawn has always been useful to attackers. People are tired. Night guards have been awake for hours. Those who slept are not fully alert. The growing light makes movement possible while shadows still conceal details. A camp that has survived until morning cannot simply assume the danger has passed. So before you rise completely, you listen. No warning. The horses sound calm. No hurried rider approaches. No strange voices carry through the cold air. Good. You sit up. Your bow is exactly where you left it. That small fact is strangely comforting. The weapon has remained untouched all night. The arrows have remained in their quiver. The lance has not been needed. The best preparation is often preparation that appears useless afterward. You prepare for an attack. No attack comes. You protect the horses. No horses are stolen. You watch the horizon. No enemy appears. And because nothing happens, everyone gets to wake up. History rarely records mornings like this. There is no official report describing a family eating quietly. No newspaper announces that a child woke safely. No military officer writes triumphantly that several hundred horses remained exactly where they had been the night before. Yet ordinary survival is made from precisely these uneventful mornings. You step outside, cold air touches your face. The eastern sky has become pale blue now, with a faint band of yellow beneath it. The shapes of the landscape return one by one. First the nearest shelters, then the horses, then the low rises of the surrounding country. Finally, the distant horizon. The world that disappeared at sunset is being rebuilt by light, and with the light comes information. A scout returning toward camp can now see details that darkness concealed. Tracks become readable again. The ground tells its overnight story. You walk toward the outer edge of camp. The grass is damp in places. Hoofprints surround the herd. Most belong to your own animals, but people look anyway. A track is not ignored merely because you expect to see tracks. Someone kneels, touches the ground, looks toward the distance. There is no alarm. The riders whose trail was noticed during the night have not approached. Perhaps they never intended to. Perhaps they were moving somewhere else entirely. The threat that kept several people awake has dissolved with morning. That happens often enough. Not every stranger becomes an enemy. Not every distant fire becomes a raid. Not every hoofprint leads to violence. This is important to remember when imagining Comanche life. The old stereotype of a warrior permanently engaged in battle flattens an entire society into one activity. War mattered, raiding mattered, horses mattered enormously. But people also had families, friendships, obligations, jokes, grief, celebrations, hunger, boredom, and mornings when nothing particularly dramatic occurred. You're standing inside one of those mornings now. A woman begins attending to the practical work of the day. Children emerge slowly. Someone checks an animal. Another person retrieves something from a bundle. Voices become more common. The camp that spent the night trying to disappear begins revealing itself to itself. Soon there may be food. Perhaps dried buffalo meat. Perhaps something prepared from supplies already carried with the camp. Buffalo has shaped life across the plains in countless ways. Its meat provides food. Its hides can become coverings, robes, containers, and other useful things. Bones, sinew, and other parts can be turned toward practical purposes. Nothing about such dependence is casual. The buffalo herds are part of the economic and physical foundation of plains life. From high ground, enormous herds can sometimes seem to darken the country. Their movement creates sound like distant weather. To someone who has grown up in this world, the animals are both ordinary and essential. You cannot yet know how quickly that abundance will be shattered. Within the 19th century, commercial hunting and expanding colonial pressure will help reduce the Great Southern Plains buffalo herds with astonishing speed. For the Comanche and other plains peoples, The destruction will not merely mean the loss of an animal, it will strike at food, trade, material culture, mobility, and independence. But that future has not arrived completely this morning. Today, the grass still stretches outward, the horses still graze, the world still seems enormous. You walk farther from the sleeping area. Behind you, the camp is waking fully now. There is a particular smell to morning cold earth, animals, old smoke, human bodies. Perhaps food warming over a carefully revived fire if circumstances allow. The fire that was reduced or hidden during the dangerous hours can now be reconsidered. Daylight changes the calculation, not necessarily because smoke is safe. Smoke can still reveal a position, but the camp may already be preparing to move, or the surrounding situation may be considered secure enough for ordinary morning tasks. Again, there is no rigid rule. There is judgment, always judgment. This may be the most important thread running through everything you have done since sunset. You chose terrain according to circumstances. You positioned horses according to their importance. You controlled fire according to danger. You relied on scouts according to what the surrounding country revealed. You kept weapons ready because uncertainty remained. The system works because it bends. A fixed rule can be learned by an enemy. A habit of adaptation is harder to defeat. The sun has not yet crossed the horizon, but the eastern sky glows brighter. You look west. Behind the camp, night still seems to remain. For a little while, you stand between the two, light in front, darkness behind. Perhaps that is an appropriate place to think about what the camp actually sounded like while you slept. Because when we imagine history, we often make it too loud. We remember gunfire, war cries, galloping horses, cannons, battles. Those sounds survive because violence creates witnesses and records. Most nights are quieter. The real soundtrack of your night has been much simpler. Wind against hide, a horse chewing, a child breathing, leather creaking, grass moving, a distant coyote, the low voice of a returning scout. Perhaps the faint crackle of a fire before it was allowed to die. Then silence. Long stretches of silence. For someone accustomed to a modern city, that silence might feel unsettling. No engines, no aircraft overhead, no electric hum. No distant traffic, no machine operating in another room. The loudest moving things for miles may be animals. This does not mean the night is truly silent. Nature is rarely silent. Instead, the number of sounds is smaller, which makes each sound more meaningful. A snapping branch demands attention because there are not hundreds of other noises covering it. A horse's sudden snort matters. A dog barking matters. Hooves where no hooves should be matter. The quieter the world, the more clearly an unfamiliar sound stands apart. That is why listening has protected you. Your ears became part of the camp's defenses. So did the horse's ears. So did the scouts. The whole nighttime system depended upon people noticing changes. A strange sound, a distant glow, an unexpected smell, fresh tracks, restless animals. Nothing supernatural, nothing mysterious, just generations of people becoming extremely good at paying attention. The first edge of the sun appears. Light spills across the grass. Almost immediately, the land looks less threatening. That feeling is deceptive. Enemies do not disappear because daylight arrives. Weather does not become harmless. Water does not become easier to find. Yet human beings are creatures of sight, and daylight restores a sense of control. You can see farther. You can see the horse clearly now. Its coat shows dust from yesterday's travel. You approach and place a hand against its neck. Warm, alive, still yours. That alone means the night's work succeeded. The herd remains, the people remain, the camp has lost nothing essential. There is no celebration. Survival this ordinary does not require one. Soon another question begins moving quietly through the camp. Stay or go? Perhaps scouts have reported enough uncertainty to make movement wise. Perhaps grazing nearby is becoming poor. Perhaps water elsewhere is better. Perhaps the camp was never intended to remain here beyond one night. Whatever the reason, mobility waits beneath every decision. You do not defend this ground because it belongs to your bed. You do not build walls because you spent one night here. The land sheltered you. Now you may leave it. By afternoon, another traveler could cross this place and see only flattened grass and the remains of a small fire. By tomorrow, wind may soften even those signs. Soon the campsite will become memory. And this is the final genius of the nighttime system. Safety does not depend on making one place impossible to attack. It depends upon never needing one place badly enough to die defending it. For generations, this mobility will make Comanche groups extraordinarily difficult for Spanish, Mexican, Texan, and United States forces to control. Armies will search immense distances. They will follow trails. They will establish forts. They will send scouts. And often they will reach the place they were seeking, only to discover that the people have already gone. Yet the pressures will grow, the armies will learn. The buffalo will diminish. The horse herds themselves will eventually become targets on a devastating scale. The world you woke into this morning will not last forever. No world does. For now, however, the sun is rising. Someone begins gathering belongings. A horse is brought forward. Tippy coverings move in the morning light. The camp that vanished into darkness last night is preparing to vanish in another way, not by hiding, by leaving. And so for the final part of our journey, we will follow it. Let us cross from the quiet morning into the long shadow of history, where the ability to break camp quickly will meet an enemy that eventually learns a terrible lesson. If the Comanche cannot easily be caught, then their horses, their food supply, and their ability to remain free must become the targets instead. Let us cross from the quiet morning into the long shadow of history, where the ability to break camp quickly will meet an enemy that eventually learns a terrible lesson. If the Comanche cannot easily be caught, then the things that make their freedom possible can be attacked instead. The sun is above the horizon now. Around you, the camp changes quickly. A short while ago, this was a sleeping place. Now it is becoming a collection of bundles. The transformation is almost unsettling. The shelter that protected a family through the cold night is not meant to remain standing forever. Its poles can come down, its covering can be folded, possessions can be gathered and prepared for transport. The home disappears without truly being lost. Home is moving with you. This is one of the reasons outsiders so often struggle against mobile societies. An army understands a fort. Capture the fort, and you possess something. An army understands a town. Occupy the streets, control the buildings, seize the stores of food, and the conquest becomes visible. But what exactly do you capture when the settlement itself can leave? You look around. Children are awake. Adults work with the practiced efficiency of people who have performed these tasks many times. Horses are being prepared, equipment is gathered, the campsite becomes emptier with every passing moment. No one needs to hold a meeting about where each object belongs. Habit has already answered that question. The same principle that placed your bow beside you during the night now governs the morning. Everything has a place. Everything that matters must travel. The teepee itself reflects this mobile world. Its poles and coverings can be dismantled and transported rather than abandoned. Among plains peoples, travois provide a practical means of carrying loads, first with dogs and, after horses became central to life, increasingly with horses. Two poles can extend behind an animal with a platform or framework between them. Bundles ride there. Possessions travel. Children or people unable to ride may also be transported when needed. The arrangement is simple. That simplicity is strength. A wagon needs something resembling a road. A travois asks much less of the landscape. You do not need a bridge every time the ground becomes difficult. You do not need carpenters following the column to repair elaborate vehicles. You need animals, knowledge, and equipment adapted to movement. By now, the campsite scarcely resembles the place where you woke. The fire is dealt with. Nothing useful is casually left behind. Horses shift impatiently. A dog moves between people. Someone laughs at something you do not hear. That small laugh matters. It reminds us that this is not an evacuation scene. No enemy is charging over the ridge. No smoke rises behind you. People are simply moving because movement is ordinary. Perhaps there is better grazing elsewhere. Perhaps the camp is following buffalo. Perhaps relatives are expected in another place. Perhaps scouts have reported enough uncertainty that remaining here feels unwise, or perhaps this place was always intended for a single night. You mount your horse. Immediately, the world changes. From the saddle, distance becomes less intimidating. The water that would require painful hours on foot can be reached much more easily. A ridge becomes something to cross rather than a barrier. This is the geography of Comanche power, not lines on a map. Travel time, horse endurance, knowledge of water, knowledge of grass, knowledge of routes that an outsider might overlook. A place belongs to your world because you know how to move through it. The group begins to leave. At first, the movement is slow. People organize themselves. Loaded animals find their pace. Riders look outward. Then the campsite falls behind. You turn once. Flattened grass, disturbed earth, a dark patch where fire had been. Tracks. That is nearly all by evening. Wind will have begun working on the evidence. Eventually, another camp will be chosen. The process will begin again. Look at the terrain, find water, consider wind, watch the horizon, protect the horses, control the fire, send eyes outward, keep weapons close, sleep, wake, move again and again. This is not a collection of clever tricks. It is a system. And systems are difficult to defeat if an enemy understands only their individual pieces. For much of the 18th and 19th centuries, outside powers struggle with that reality. Spanish authorities attempt diplomacy, warfare, trade, and shifting alliances. Mexico inherits its own difficult frontier. Texas enters the conflict. Then the United States expands its military reach across the region. The names of the governments change. The fundamental problem often remains. How do you force a highly mobile people to remain where you can control them? Cavalry can pursue, but cavalry horses tire. Soldiers need supplies. Large columns need food. They need ammunition. They need water. They need pack animals. Every day of pursuit stretches the line between the army and whatever supports it. The Comanche know the country. They know where water should be, they know routes, they can divide, they can disappear. And they do not need to defend a permanent capital. There is no single castle whose capture ends the war, no throne room, no central stone fortress. So the campaigns continue, then the strategy changes. By the 1870s, the struggle on the southern plains has entered its final and increasingly destructive phase. The United States Army applies sustained pressure against the remaining free bands. At the same time, the buffalo economy is being devastated. Commercial hunters kill buffalo on an enormous scale. The great herds that had supported Plains peoples for generations begin disappearing. Imagine what that means from inside the camp. It does not simply mean there are fewer animals to hunt. A buffalo is food. A hide is material. Sinew has uses. Bones have uses. The animal supports trade and domestic life. Remove the herds, and you are removing pieces of an entire economic system. Then there are the horses. You already know what the horse means. We have spent the night learning it. The horse beside you is not an accessory to Comanche life. It is the engine of mobility. Take the horse away and the land expands. Water becomes farther away. Hunting becomes harder. Moving camp becomes slower. Escaping an army becomes more difficult. The very distances that once protected you begin working against you. And the army eventually understands this. In 1874, during the Red River War, Colonel Ranald Mackenzie leads troops into Palo Duro Canyon. This is country the Comanche and their allies have used as refuge. Canyon walls provide shelter, water and grass support people and horses. It is exactly the kind of terrain that has made sense throughout our long night. But no defensive system remains perfect forever. Mackenzie's force surprises camps in the canyon. People escape with relatively limited loss of life compared with what might have happened had they been trapped. But the army captures a huge number of horses, and this time the animals are not simply trophies. The destruction of much of the captured herd becomes part of the campaign. Think about that for a moment. Not a dramatic duel between famous warriors, not two lines of soldiers meeting in a field. Horses. The quiet animals you listened to chewing grass in the darkness. The animals guarded while others slept. The animals that carried children, belongings, hunters, and warriors. The animals that made enormous distances manageable. Their destruction strikes directly at mobility. Suddenly, the lesson of our first night returns. You can choose excellent terrain, you can read tracks, you can control your fire, you can post scouts, you can keep a bow beside you. But all of those preparations depend upon your ability to respond when danger arrives. And response depends heavily upon movement. The horse was there from the beginning. That is why you protected it before sleeping. That is why guards watched the herd. That is why horse theft was so serious. That is why raiding enemy horses could be strategically powerful. And that is why destroying Comanche horse herds could do what repeated pursuits struggled to accomplish. The survival system had a vulnerable center. It breathed, it ate grass, it stood on four legs. After the campaigns of the middle 1870s, the remaining free Comanche bands faced a world in which their options were collapsing. Buffalo were disappearing. Military pressure continued. Horse losses reduced mobility. Reservation life was being imposed. Quanah Parker, one of the best-known Comanche leaders of this final period of resistance, eventually led his people to Fort Sill in 1875. There would be no return to the old independence of Comancheria. The world of the night we have imagined was changing forever. But be careful with the word ending. Peoples do not become past tense simply because one way of life is violently disrupted. The Comanche did not vanish. Their descendants did not vanish. The Comanche Nation continues today, centered in Oklahoma, carrying language, identity, family histories, ceremonies, and cultural memory into a world unimaginably different from the one we entered at sunset. That distinction matters. History has an unfortunate habit of ending indigenous stories at the moment the United States government declares a military campaign complete. Real lives continue beyond the final chapter of a military history book. Children grow up, families adapt. Languages survive or struggle and are taught again. Communities remember, people remain. And so perhaps we should not end our journey with the cavalry. Let us return instead to the night before, back to the quiet camp. Back before Palo Duro, back before the final surrender of the free bands, back to the moment when you were lying beneath the stars. The fire had gone dark. Your bow rested beside you. Your horse breathed nearby. A scout watched somewhere beyond the camp. The wind moved across the grass. You did not know what history would call your century. You did not know that strangers would someday study the way your people slept. You were simply tired. That may be the most human detail of all. Behind every famous warrior is a person who became cold, hungry, sleepy. Behind every military campaign are ordinary evenings when people wanted food and rest. Behind the grand phrase Comanche Empire were families trying to wake safely in the morning, and the practices that helped them do so were neither mysterious nor magical. Choose ground carefully, understand water, watch the wind, protect the horse. Guard the herd, use fire with judgment. Send scouts beyond the sleeping camp. Keep what you need close. Pay attention. Respect what you cannot control. Then rest. There is wisdom in how ordinary that sounds. Perhaps that is why these nighttime habits lasted. They were not performances. No one practiced them because a historian would someday write them down. They existed because tomorrow mattered. The prairie darkens again in our imagination. One by one, the details disappear. The canyon wall, the distant ridge, the horses, the tippies. Finally, even the ground seems to dissolve beneath the stars. Only sound remains: wind, grass, a horse breathing, then less and less, until the southern plains are quiet again. So wherever you are listening tonight, you can leave Comancheria here. Leave the horse with the sleeping camp. Leave the scout on the ridge. Leave the bow untouched beside its owner. The people beneath this enormous sky do not know what tomorrow will bring. For the moment, they do not need to. They have done what they can. The ground was chosen. The horses were protected. The fire was controlled. The scouts were sent. The weapons were ready. The prayers were spoken. And now, at last, there is nothing left to do but sleep.